Hello guys and welcome to another episode of the MSC Performance Podcast with me, Mark Coulson. Today I am with Luke Rogers. How are we doing, Luke?
Good. How are you?
That was a hell of an entrance. Our two YouTube prescribers subscribers would have enjoyed that.
Shout out to Lara and Alan Bush.
Everyone else on Spotify hasn't got a clue what we're talking about, but welcome to the latest poddy. Today's episode, I think we can jump straight into it. So we're going to be talking about powerlifting. So we're going to be jumping into the world of powerlifting, sort of finding out what's going on at the moment, how you can get into powerlifting, the benefits of it, etc., etc. It's going to be kind of almost interviewee style. So I'll just ask Luke some questions, and obviously he's the man in the know when it comes to powerlifting, and we'll have a bit of a discussion and see where it goes. What's going on in the world of powerlifting at the moment?
So the world of powerlifting is healing, much like the world in itself, and normality is returning. There's been a couple of competitions recently, which is great to see. Gives people a timeline to work towards. Gives people something to start training towards, which is great to see, and kind of gives a bit of direction to the training, which I think a lot of people lack when it's just ongoing training. It's nice to have something to work towards. So in terms of MSC, we've got 8 people competing next weekend at the Super Training Meet, which is really exciting. So there's 8 from MSC, 7 of them which I coach, which has been really excellent to start getting people ready for competitions again. And just the buzz in the gym and just the buzz of coaching people ready for these has been fantastic to see. So myself, I'll be competing there as well, just as a bit of like a warm-up meet for some slightly bigger competitions later in the year. But yeah, so there's 8 of us doing the Super Training Comp, which will be great to see. There should be a live stream as well. Well, there is a live stream because it's still, because of the COVID, not allowed to have spectators. But it should be a good competition. I think a lot of people are looking to get some good PBs, which is great after most people had some kind of layoff after COVID. And it's kind of like what we said before about it doesn't actually take as long, and you can maintain your strength quite relatively easily during like periods of time where you're not able to train quite as much. It is quite easy to maintain your strength gains, and that's kind of materialised where, like I said, a lot of people are looking for all-time PBs, which normally takes like a good year of training, but there's some decent level people hitting some good PBs. So
that's really exciting. So obviously this is pretty much the first comp back for people. You mentioned this, you're using this as a bit of a stepping stone towards some other bigger comps. What else is coming up in the sort of this near future?
So what's quite exciting, so I was provisionally selected for Worlds, which was due to take place in Belarus, but because of the COVID restrictions, then I think Belarus, I'm not sure exactly, but maybe haven't handled the situation. There's political unrest, so there's a few countries pulled out, including Great Britain, which said they weren't going to take a team. So I kind of draw the line and do it for Worlds is not happening. So then getting ready for the British, which is in September. And then literally 2 days later, they've moved the Worlds to Sweden. So now Worlds is in Sweden. And then announced today that Great Britain are taking a team. So all being well with COVID, I think I will be competing at Worlds. So my first Worlds, and I'm really excited about it. So this is very much a warm-up meet, just to, dust off the old cobwebs, as they say. Chance just to kind of work up to around 90%, have a little bit of time away, and then start prepping for Worlds in Sweden, which I've been to Worlds twice as a coach, so handling as mainly the junior team in Calgary and also in Sweden. So this one will be, it's one of I've got like a few aims that I really wanted to achieve as a lifter. One of them was like winning the British, getting a British record, and then the last 2 international level stuff. It's competing at Worlds and then eventually trying to get some kind of international medal for like either a squat or a deadlift, probably not the bench. So this is another one ticked off, fingers crossed. And it's also going to be at the Elite Co Performance Centre, which is it's going to be unreal. So
that's mega.
It's a lot easier to convince people, like mention it to Elise about coming to Belarus isn't quite as appealing as going to Sweden, and everyone loves Sweden. So really excited to get stuck into.
Very nice. If you can rob a couple of plates, a couple of Aligo plates and bars, and sneak them on the play back with you, then
I'm sure the one
would be much appreciated. Nice. How's your prep going for you individually, and then
team,
and then for the MSC team?
So for myself, it's going okay. I'm feeling pretty strong. Just not everything's feeling 100% in terms of my my adductor. Like it's okay. I'm just aware of it, which is one of the other reasons why I'm only going up to around 90%. I need just a period of time just to get 100% healthy, and I think we're not a million miles away from it. But just pushing that intensity again, and something I was speaking to you about is just, I think, taking away some of the accessory work that's been staples before and focusing more on like the competition lifts just hasn't been perfect for me, and I think I probably took too much away. So like stuff like the unilateral work, like split squats, etc. No one likes to do them, but me and you are both massive advocates of them. Stuff like extra adductor work, and yeah, I had a session with Max, and he mentioned about, obviously when you've had an area that's injured, it's just going to be a little bit more exposed, but also it's going to be a weakness and probably requires a little bit more attention.
Needs some tolerance and needs some build up of, some workload for it. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, gradually building that back in, even though getting ready for the comp. So adding some single leg work back in there. I can do 90%, no problem. But it's just getting that last 10% needs a good prep. So I'm slowly building back up the adductor work, the single leg work. And yeah, fingers crossed that we can start to put together a good prep for Worlds. In terms of everyone else, it's genuinely been a really good prep for the other 6 people that we coach. Everyone's kind of hitting PBs or thereabout in the training. So yeah, if we can get a good kind of taper in and maintain the strength that they've built, we should be well in. No one's really worrying about their weight. Everyone's well within the category, or like only like a 1 or 2% water cut, which for a lot of people, they're normally cutting a decent amount of weight to try and get into a category. Like I competed at 74. I'm currently 76.5. So even from South, that's quite a small cut. Well, normally I'm about 77, maybe just a touch above. So very manageable cut. So yeah, the majority of people should be hitting some good numbers, which is great to see. What I really enjoy at this part is just the little nuances and the little individuality that you see in people's peaking. We spoke about this in one of the last podcasts about how people expect, like when they get an individualized program, to it be black and white and night and day different to somebody else's. Yeah. But you got 7 guys competing in powerlifting, so they're all going to be doing singles on squat, bench, and deadlift. But then the difference is coming like when people take in their last heavier singles, when people start doing singles, how long people keep doing rep work for, how much you're dropping back in terms of reducing the volume at this point. And like a couple of good interesting ones is like if you look at Tez and Chalkley, they're 2 of like my very good levels. Like Tez could qualify for the British, Chalkley's there or thereabout, and he's pulling 275. Because Chalkley is such a big deadlifter, he deadlifted 275 for his last single. He's taken his deadlift a week earlier than Tez's, whose deadlift is at 250, just because the amount of stress that working up to that weight. Also, he's taller, so when you add in the amount of distance into the calculation for the volume, he's working a lot harder. It's a lot more work. So he's taken his last deadlift 2 weeks out, and the rest of his lifts are a week out. While Tez is all like his last deadlift is 10 days out. His last squat was on Monday, so he's taking his heaviest lifts this week. So quite interesting little things like that. And then also like how long you're doing singles with people. Some people are doing singles for a further amount of time. Other people are doing like doubles and triples still, and then just 1 or 2 weeks of singles. So I really enjoy this part of it, and these little individualized differences based off the data that you got of people, and also just a lot of it's just educated guesses.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I've always found it quite fascinating, like the individual handling side of things, both from a physiological point of view and a psychological point of view as well, how to get people ready. Because like I say, you're doing your training blocks, during the year and during off season and pre-season, if you like, where like people can be hitting big numbers and putting up good numbers in the gym, but ultimately we've got to do it on the dance floor. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's the same in any other sport. Like, you refer to in rugby sometimes, like, there's a couple of guys who train like Tarzan and compete like Jane, and it's similar to powerlifting, isn't it? Like, you got to turn up on the day and get those numbers right, and those little individual, it's not the same for everyone. It's not like that 1 week taper or 2 week taper as a set standard. It's very individual based on those things you're talking about. Like I said, like a bit more behind it than people might think.
The big thing is like the individualized feedback. So a couple of the things that we track, similar to in like the barbell club, is like people's sleep quality, their desire to train, their kind of readiness for the sessions. If these scores, which are arbitrary, are coming down, then you're like, okay, we need to maybe taper back more than maybe we originally thought. And I mentioned Tez, he's taking his singles slightly closer than Chalkley. We've actually started to drop back his volume on some of like his variants, like his belt squat, some pressing work. We've started to reduce that down more because he's reporting high levels of fatigue. So just starting to draw him back a little bit earlier than maybe we did for Chocolate, who's still reporting decent scores. And I think half of that is because we've changed, like when he's taking his heavier singles. But yeah, these little differences, they really do matter. Like I said, the idea is to make sure everyone lifts optimally on the day, and that's where the skill comes in, and that's where these decisions are all made about trying to get the best result on the day, making sure people are on peak during their training, and making people, like, you bring back the fatigue in a way that they're able to perform optimally on the stage. Because you get a lot of people, they'll miss the lift, and then a few days later they'll try and do it again, and they'll get it. And that's not the sport. Like, no one gives a shit what you're getting another time. All that matters is at the competition. So it doesn't matter what you do 2 weeks out.
It's on the dance floor where it counts. Get it done at comp, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's where the medals are won, and where people want to perform.
Yeah, but it's exciting. Like Elisa's deadlifted 175 at 84, which is a very big deadlift. Chalky 275. Tez squatted 217, which was a 7 kilo PB. Naz is flirting with her PBs again, and her heaviest lift is on Friday. So yeah, everyone's doing really good. Literally every single person's really prepping.
Are you surprised at how people have bounced back from COVID and from the lockdowns physically to get to the position where they are, where you're going back into first comps, and like you're talking about PBs, you're talking about people breaking records and putting in good performances. Really, like, are you surprised that people have done as well as they have? Nobody can see COVID coming, obviously.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because you get the information, it's like 10% up to 30% you're here to maintain. So most people during lockdown were doing something. So on paper, you see all this information that's saying that it is quite easy to maintain, but you haven't actually got that like proof from doing it yourself.
Sure.
So a lot of people were training either like just once or twice, or didn't have access to kit and were doing like the absolute bare minimum. But I've come back and, like I said, have progressed well. So I am very pleasantly surprised. I think this is like the minimum amount of time. Like, if it was a month earlier, then I wouldn't have been as confident of people getting such good numbers. I think this is like the perfect amount. I'm not sure exactly off the top of my head. Maybe it's been like 16 weeks, 4 months maybe since we've been open.
Yeah.
So I think that's like
it's a decent sized block, isn't it?
It's a training cycle. 16 weeks is a training cycle. If it was like you have to rush it for 8 to 12 weeks, I wouldn't be as confident. But I think getting a full training cycle in after a period of time of not being quite as pushing your training as hard, I think that's fine. And you hear about other people like having blocks where it's non-specific or not even focused on powerlifting, and then doing a 16-week block and feeling great.
Sure.
Which is why, like, I'm fairly optimistic that if I can get to 90, well, I am at 90%. I'm doing it in training. Having a little bit of time off after the comp, and then prepping for Worlds, which I think will be about, off the top of my head, I think it's like 11 or 12 weeks. I think that was a good amount of time to get from 90% to 100%. I haven't got to go from 70% up. So as long as I'm feeling healthy, we should be able to go.
You're not starting from scratch with like, a big general preps,
exactly
period needed or anything like that.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. With the so sort of spoke about the physical side of things, and the guys are physically looking ready. What about mentally? Obviously, it's been quite a long time since people have competed. How are you coping with that yourself? Any change in approach for you? Any change in approach for the squad that are competing? How are people feeling about it? What about the mental side of the game?
I think it's tough. Like, no one's really like. There are people getting nervous. People are starting to like the commands and stuff like that to try and get as ready for it as possible. I think one of the benefits of being in like a powerlifting-esque gym is that you've got other people around you that can keep you to the standards that you need to lift at. I think if people were lifting in like a commercial gym and they were in front of a mirror, not sure where the standards were, I think it'd be completely different. But I think everyone's very confident with what they're doing because they've got the right people around them. That said, because this comp's going to be completely different to any other comp, like, we can't go in and watch it if you're not competing. So like, as soon as you compete, you've got to leave. So there's me, Tez and Seppi on the Saturday. So there's only 3 of us. Then the day after, there's the other 5. And I would normally be at the competition, handling people. I think when you take that away, people are going to be slightly more nervous on the day. But because of the live stream, I should be able to like keep in contact and stuff, which will be great. But I think at the minute, everyone seems calm and everyone seems sound with the standards that they're lifting to. But then as soon as you get onto the day and you look out and it's like a weird empty gym, with just a couple of judges, all of a sudden, instead of your friends cheering you on, you've just got 3 judges there. I think it might be a little bit more daunting. It's very different. Because normally it's like you go out and if there's like 8 of us there, it's like being at MSC and you've got 8 people who are cheering you on. But you take that away and it's very quiet. It's going to be very different, but I think everyone's going to handle it really well. My mentality going to is a little bit different because it's just a bit of a warm-up, so I've just put no pressure on it whatsoever. There's no pressure for me to hit a certain amount of numbers. Just go and enjoy the weekend and get some practice the commands, make sure everything is to the standard that it needs to be for Worlds, and then take it from there. So I'm very relaxed going into it, which is nice because the last few competitions have been quite high pressured. So I'm trying to put no pressure on it whatsoever and just kind of enjoy it for what it is.
Get used to hitting those signals in a comp environment, well, sort of a comp environment, commands.
Getting used to having to warm up again is a massive one.
Exactly. Timing.
It's so easy to get ready for a single when you can have as much rest as you want. But if you've got 25 minutes, you've got to do 4 warm-up sets. You just got to get used to that timing again. So it'll be cool to do, and I'm really excited for it.
Fantastic. Back to the physical stuff actually. Just briefly sort of going through the COVID stuff again, and obviously, we've got the proof now that we can get away with that little bit of time of not doing, not being overly specific, not lifting overly heavy, and then coming back and doing a block and actually getting back to a good standard. I think we spoke about this before, like ourselves, but would you be more inclined and more relaxed now about over an annual cycle or a 6-month cycle, putting in a block of like, obviously there'd be general prep work anyway, but being more relaxed and coming away from the lifts completely if needed, like just a bit more relaxed about how
far away
specific. Yeah, exactly. We've seen it with like Olympic lifters coming back really well as well, and like I think before, anyone involved in Olympic lifting would be frightened, to not snatch for a week, some form of snatch, whether it's a power or a hip or a light or whatever it might be. Because you're going to like lose the skill and etc. What we're seeing is people coming back and actually hitting quite good standards. That's not to say like go and have like massive rest, but in a 12-month, let's take an annual for example. Over 12 months, would you be more relaxed now about like with someone who needed a lot of single leg work, needed a lot of corrective work, needed those accessories of saying like for a month, right, let's go absolute minimal dose on squat, bench, deadlift, like absolute minimal, and putting in a lot of the other work. Would you be more relaxed now having gone through the COVID experience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you've got to take into account you've got to take into account the
just had a spillage there, but it's all good.
You've got to take the individual into account, like mentally how they're going to feel. But if they're confident with everything that you're giving them and they're confident after the COVID, then I would definitely be more inclined to take it slightly further away from the specific work. And let's say before, if it was like 80% accessories and variants and then 20% of the competition lifts, I'd probably be more inclined to take it slightly further to maybe like 10% competition work. So most people would still want to do like some kind of competition, or at least a bar on their back. So maybe a high bar, but I would definitely be a little bit more inclined to take it further away. In particular, if people have got like the general aches and pains or little kind of niggles that come up from competing in powerlifting, I would definitely have a block away from those competition lifts. And I think people now know that and aren't too worried about that. So I think we could definitely do that moving forward with people. Obviously, again, it's schedule dependent because the luxury of COVID, if there was any, including for yourself, is that you've got this year where there's going to be no competitions. While it might only be 16 weeks before the next one, then all of a sudden a month without it, it might be fine, but people just mentally might not be ready to not be squatting 12 weeks out from a competition. So I think, if you can give yourself a period of time, maybe 6 months or 5 months before comp, you could definitely do at least a couple of weeks, almost as like a bit of a desensitization and just like a fully just to recoup and make sure everything's feeling 100%, restore your health, and then kind of take it from there. So I definitely would be.
Yeah, sure. With the fact that there's no comps and stuff, like it's been, like I say, not that COVID's a luxury, of course, but like, it's been a luxury that you can do more, general prep work, etc. And same from my point of view, from a rugby standpoint, is like normally an off season is 4 weeks, and then you're back at pre-season, and then you're back into games. So it's a very short window. You don't have the luxury for, a massive general prep cycle, which, because of what's happened, I had pretty much a 16-week general prep, 12, 16 week where like the specificity was quite minimal, like 10-20%, and the rest of it was like just pure general prep. Then it was like a bigger strength cycle than normal, and then it's bigger conversion time than normal as well. Whereas normally that 52 weeks is normally condensed into 4 weeks, so you don't quite have the luxury. But yeah, it's been an interesting time for sure. So what about if you've got listeners here who sort of thinking this all sounds pretty cool, they'd like to compete, they know a little bit about powerlifting, but they don't know where to start. What's the best kind of way to get into powerlifting?
So yeah, good question. I really am a massive believer in your environment. So I think trying to get involved in some kind of powerlifting club or in a gym where powerlifters train, and they're not rare anymore, where before it was quite difficult to find a club. Like most places will have a club. It might not be a powerlifting gym. We're not a powerlifting gym, but we have a lot of powerlifters here and a lot of powerlifting equipment. Yeah. So you'll be able to find some kind of facility that has powerlifters there. Someone that's going to help you kind of with the motivation and the atmosphere that you need to thrive, but also just to keep you accountable and make sure that everything that you're doing is to the standard it needs to be to actually compete with. Because you'll go to a commercial gym and you'll see the standard of squatting and deadlifting, and it's not where it needs to be. And that's why people lift a lot less when they do their first comp. Yeah. So I would definitely try and get involved in a powerlifting gym or a gym where powerlifters train. Ideally, if you can financially afford it, I think getting a coach, at least for a few sessions, is a massive thing. I would prioritise getting one-to-one work to begin with if you've never had that or no one's ever looked at it, just to make sure again that you're doing everything right to, most importantly, don't hurt yourself, and then trying to make things as efficient as you can. Give yourself good fundamentals to then take forward. There's a million programs online that you don't have to pay for, but I do think it's worthwhile having some one-to-one coaching. And then if you decide to work with them moving forward, fantastic. Otherwise, there's some great structured programs online that are more than enough to get you started with. But I do believe in having that first hands-on coaching, even if it's for peace of mind, just to make sure that working with a powerlifting coach, make sure your squats are to standard, they're efficient, and you're not going to get hurt with suboptimal technique. So definitely recommend there. And then moving forward from there, it's finding competition. The biggest powerlifting federation in Britain is British Powerlifting. That's the drug-free option. It's the one that's the biggest federation. It's British Powerlifting linked to British Weightlifting, which is linked to British Rowing. It's the one that's at the forefront of powerlifting. If you wanted to do a different one, there are different options. But if you was looking for competition in a you were drug free, because there is a non-tested version. But if you wanted to pursue and you wanted to get to a higher level, or you wanted at least to compete with other people, British Powerlifting is the one to go for. They have the most amount of comps. They're the most well organised. So you'd have to join British Powerlifting, and then from there it's just finding out what region you fall into. So obviously, if you're in Birmingham, you're in the West Midlands. If you're in London, you're in the London, etc. Northwest. Find your region and see what competitions they've got from there. So for the West Midlands, I also run the West Midlands Powerlifting. So it's a nice little thing for people when they join MSC, is that they already know myself through winning MSC, but then also when they get to West Midlands, I'll be there, as will most of the members and people we coach, because they help win the competitions as well. So it's nice to have that as a bit of a plus for MSC, and to make people feel welcomed. There's Tash and Overcline Liv are doing their first West Midlands comp. Second for Tash, first for Liv in August. And in terms of nerves, they're just so much more relaxed knowing that people that are going to be running their desk and spotting and loading are guys from MSC.
People we're familiar with,
So you need to join British Powerlifting / the alternative, find your region, and then find your competition, and then work it from there. That's the difficulty with the programming, is you need to then find a program that fits the timeline that you've got. So
sure.
You might do the off the top of my head, Calgary Barbell program, which is 16 weeks. You need to time that then around it. While the benefit of individuality and individualized programs would be specific to your timeline.
Yeah, specific to your timeline, and also the feedback elements alongside that as well. Do you know what I mean? You buy a template and it's it's not been written for you. Obviously, there's still some good benefits to using it, and it's a hell of a lot better than trying to do it yourself or not having a program to follow. But obviously, the individual aspects is the constant feedback, the updating, the fatigue monitoring.
There's a difference between receiving a program and getting coaching, even if it's online coaching, like yourself. the feedback that you give, which then dictates how the session's altered moving forward, is massive. So yeah, there's definitely a time and a place where you'll need coaching. Like you said, to begin with, if you're not wanting to compete, you just want to do some kind of powerlifting style training, and you can't make it to a gym, an online program is great. But eventually, like, the benefit of getting coaching is that feedback, making sure everything's as efficient as you can, and altering it based off the feedback you're giving. So yeah, there's definitely benefits to that.
I think, like, obviously the ultimate is if you can afford it and it fits in with your diary, is to have, like, obviously ongoing coaching, whether that's, you know, programming or one-to-one coaching. But like you said, even if you can't, just getting 1 or 2 or 3 sessions to begin with, initial sessions, like, just you know, refine that technique as best as you can, is such a good investment.
100%. And yeah, for a few people, like I said, the peace of mind, like, if people are not 100% confident with their technique, or just want to make sure that they're going to these competitions and they're lifting to the standard, it can be great for that. But also, when you're first starting out, you're not going to be doing everything 100%, and you're going to save yourself a lot of time and a lot of effort if you can get someone just to give you a few pointers. And like I said, spending 3 hours with you, just going through squat, bench and deadlift technique is huge. So it's definitely worthwhile. Like I said, getting feedback as much as you can, but if it doesn't financially fit, getting some kind of initial coaching from someone is a massive thing. If you can't afford coaching and you've got to run a program, then try and be surrounded by other powerlifters that can at least give you some feedback.
Yeah, I think the environment's a really good point you made as well. Like, I just think that makes an absolutely huge difference. I think, like, one of the good things with, you know, MSC, using that as an example, is, like, you know, from the powerlifting, you know, especially, but like through everything, just having like-minded people that you're training with. Like, obviously with powerlifting, you've got the specificity of, like, someone checking your depth, giving you, like, very specific feedback. But, like, just the atmosphere in general of, like, training with, like, people who are similar-minded, like, all different levels, of course, but, like, different sports, different, you know.
I love it on a Monday night at the minute. You've got, like, jazz, weightlifting. You've got a couple of guys now, like basketball and American footballers, like, training hard and training well. And it's an inspiring environment.
Feeding off each other. Like, imagine, like, trying to do that kind of training in, like you say, a commercial gym. Like, it's just nowhere near as inspiring. And, like, you're not, you know, like, the good thing here is everyone's feeding off each other. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're watching jazz and, like, obviously you're not weightlifting, but, like, it's a different sport. And, like, but you're looking at that.
Watching jazz, like,
getting that buzz, getting that, like, feel for, like, this is a place where, like, good quality lifting is done. It's inspiring for me as a rugby player to watch, like, the strength qualities and the intensity of which some of the powerlifters train. In the, you know, some of the weightlifters train, and, like you say, like, the basketball guys, the American football guys. Like, I feed off that personally.
Well, if you watch Jazz do, like, a ballsy, like, snatch, you know, he's fucking aggressive under the bar, and you watch that and it can't not inspire you. You watch the American footballers, like, training, like, athletically, or, like, you know, doing good, powerful lifts. It's inspiring. Like, anyone to be training well and training hard. It's just a good environment. It's a good, like, eclectic mix of different sports, but all training to get better and all kind of like-minded in that respect. And yeah, it's fantastic. So I definitely feel the atmosphere. I mean, 6 years ago when we used to train at Bannatynes was, you know, you do what you can, but it's not ideal, both from an equipment perspective, but also just, like...
Well, you're trying to load up that 10 kilo bar to...
deadlifting.
There was only one 20k bar, wasn't there? And that was normally in the squat wrap main curl.
Yeah, I was trying to squat with, like, John at the time, and, like, I was still fairly new, but I was, like, still fairly strong, trying to squat above 200 on a Saturday, and, like, there'd be a couple of guys, like, on the phone just, like, doing nothing in the corner. You're trying to train hard, and it's just not the environment for it.
Huge.
So if you can get the environment and get that little bit of...
The environment's big, man. Right, that's big, isn't it? Yeah. So interesting stuff. Yeah. So, like, if you wanted to start off, like, what about the importance of, like, just good general qualities and, like...
This is something I'm a massive advocate for, and I think that a lot of people specialise too early. People that have got no athletic background, never played a sport, and I think a lot of it is, like, if you're not very athletic, you go to university. There's a university powerlifting club that looks interesting. There's something about that seems to draw maybe that kind of mentality. If you wanted to be involved in sports but find team sports a bit too much, it seems to attract, like, people that are a bit more introverted. So a lot of, like, people that haven't got that sporting background and take up powerlifting. The danger of that is just that early specialisation, which can happen in anything. is probably not a good idea from like a, maximizing how much you can actually get out of the training, but also from an injury perspective. So I think having these general qualities beforehand is a massive thing. So you can tell the people that come into powerlifting from having like some kind of athletic background, so playing a sport, which is one of the reasons I think America is so far ahead of like England, is their background compared to ours in terms of sport is ridiculous. And the amount of people now, like, Taylor Atwood just did the most ridiculous total at the US Nationals, and he was like a very good American footballer.
Yeah, you get guys who are like not quite making the cut in the NFL. And it's like, I mean, if you don't quite make the cut in the NFL, you are an unbelievable athlete, and you're going to squat and deadlift and bench pretty well.
Yeah, well, they're deadlifting and squatting from like such a young age. As part of the American training.
So much more seriously sport, don't they? So, like you say, you're getting guys like who maybe at 6, 7, 8 years old, 9 years old aren't growing up specifically with the dream of being a powerlifter, because there's bigger, more commercial sports out there, but like they've got a dream of making the NFL or the NBA or whatever it is, and it's like like they're not quite making that cut, or they don't pursue that for whatever reason. It's like the transfer across to to powerlifting. It's like, Jesus, like they've already got a background of 15, 20 years of like good S&C training, good all-round general qualities, like you say, and then it's even like, right, let's try and apply the skill to that already like absolute physical monster.
Even if you haven't done like the S&C, just playing a sport, just like positional awareness and like motor control, actually just like knowing how to train hard is massive. And I think people just don't quite have that if they haven't spent time in the gym, which is like, so if you were interested in getting powerlifting but you haven't done any gym work or any sport, I'd recommend like a very long period of time of just kind of getting used to being in the gym and just doing more general style training in the gym rather than just going specific squat, bench, deadlift, building some muscle mass, doing lots of accessory work. I think as well as like building the muscle mass, which we know will set you up for the potential to then lift more further down the line, just from like an injury reduction perspective of doing all this accessory work and lifting well and learning to train hard, is so much more beneficial then to then pursuing powerlifting. So I think if you've got a sport background or you've done like bodybuilding style training or just some kind of training and then want to get in powerlifting, fantastic. If you've never gone into a gym before but you wanted to powerlift, I would definitely recommend just doing some very good like non-specific strength training, general prep work. So you could still squat and deadlift, but just not early specialising it and doing singles all year round, squat, bench and deadlift.
Learn to goblet squat first.
Learn to goblet squat, and then
can you do that? Right, let's get a bar on your back.
But even if you can,
not singles, not
even if you can do a barbell squat after like a month, like not just doing barbell squat, doing front squats, doing safety bar squat, doing single leg work, doing hamstrings, doing loads of machine work. The amount of muscle mass, we spoke about this before, but like the amount of muscle mass you're going to build through machine work compared to a squat, especially when you're just starting out and your motor control's not that good, and the fatigue causes you to have technique breakdown. The amount of muscle mass you're going to build from doing the machines is massive. Yeah. And then the amount of like motor control you're going to get from doing single leg work is going to be so much better. Yeah. So I just think, try not to get too specific too soon. So if you're like very new into training, spend that time doing that work with the bigger picture of still powerlifting. And you don't have to say I'm a powerlifter, so I need to squat, bench, and deadlift. You can say I have the dream of competing in powerlifting. So for now, I'm building up a good foundation of strength and building up a good base of athletic development to then push on with powerlifting in the future. Yeah. If you look at like weightlifters, I know it's completely different because of the age, but like when they're like 6 years old and we've scouted them in like Kazakhstan or in China, they're not getting them doing Olympic lifting. They're getting them to do jumps, swimming, these athletic movements which set up the foundations for weightlifting further down the line, rather than making them do clean and jerk at 4 years old, which is fantastic to see, but it's not what's going to make them an amazing weightlifting further down the line. It's these athletic qualities which can be developed.
General prep, variation.
And there'll be a time, like I said, for specific work, but build up some muscle mass first, build up some good control, learn to train hard. Don't squat and like have technical breakdown when you're 2 months in. Do some squats, practice that skill, then go and do some machine work. Treat it like
play the long game, like you say, as we know through coaching, for the time we have, like just developing that skill first. Like the weight will come easy, the weight will come over time, and so far you can get with just basic progressive overload, but like the skill is like the key, isn't it? Being able to be well-rounded, being able to squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, rotate, planes of movement, different variations, deadlift, Romanian deadlift, trap bar deadlift, back squat, front squat, goblet squat, split squat.
Even if if you've got someone like with a field sport, the amount that they'll be able to deadlift even if they're not deadlifting, from just being able to jump well, and just from being able to sprint well and produce speed and force from there, is going to have it's going to have some transfer. So even just being able to produce good speed and force on on loads of different variations, it's going to be really beneficial. And I think rather than starting squatting like really low weights and then just trying to build that every single week, building up this massive foundation of good exercise that you can call upon is massive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you are young and you start now and things like that, you're looking at more exercise, variation and selection. So you might be doing quite a lot of exercises in a session. You might be doing 8 to 10, maybe 12 exercises in a session, but it'd be low volume. It'd be 1 set, 2 sets of each thing, obviously light to moderate loads, and just being well rounded. That's just going to give you such a good foundation for further developing further athletic qualities and more specific athletic qualities as well.
The danger that comes is when you look at like the best powerlifters, which is what everyone does say, I should be doing what they be doing.
Yes.
And you compare it to the world champion, and they're obviously doing very highly specific work.
Yeah.
Or even if it's not specific, if it's post-comp, it's still closely mimics powerlifting training.
Yeah.
But if you looked at what they were doing when they were at your stage, it would be completely different to just doing squat, bench, and deadlift and those close variants. So look at what they were doing from an early stage. And
take inspiration from these guys, but you're on your own journey. Everyone's got their own timeline.
Exactly.
Weightlifting, Lou and Clock Off are big ones. People watch some of their stuff and what they're doing, and it's
let me do an underwater snatch like Clock Off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so just focus on your own stuff and realize where you're at. Like I say, take inspiration from the big guys, but take your time. So I think that's a big one. Any other bits and pieces you want to get into in terms of the world of powerlifting?
I think we've
covered some good content.
Covered it quite well. I think now if you're looking into getting into powerlifting, you have a good idea of the importance of joining somewhere for the environment, for to get that feedback at least from someone that powerlifts. You know where to go through British Powerlifting or the alternative. Find your region, find a competition, get some good structure in there, get as much feedback as you viably can. And then choose competitions, work backwards from it, and don't be scared to, if you're just starting out, just to spend a lot of time building up general qualities, not going specific with your squat, bench and deadlift work, just having a big broad base of exercises to build some muscle mass, to get used to training hard, and then getting more specific as you get closer to those competitions. But there's absolutely no rush, and there's no need to really specialise until you're right ready for your first competition, which obviously then the last part of that should be spent heavily around squat, bench and deadlift and getting ready for there. But don't be scared to take a step further away than maybe what your initially thought would be, and progressively build up from there.
General prep, then specific prep later on. Happy days.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Over and out. Cheers, guys, for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed that episode. And
till the next one.
Till the next one.
Cheers.
Cheerio.